Michael McCormack has opened the door to the National Party supporting a net zero by 2050 target if agriculture is exempted from the policy.
New Zealand? Well, yes, they've said that 2050 is a target, but they've also had that caveat with their agriculture. Well, if that's what it takes, well, that's what it takes. But we're not going to hurt regional Australia.
But is it a case of everybody following the leader? To discuss this and more, I'm joined now by Queensland Senator, National Party LNP Senator Matt Canavan from Yeppoon in Queensland. Well, Senator Canavan, your leader, Deputy Prime Minister Michael McCormack, has effectively rubber-stamped net zero by 2050 if agriculture is carved out. Do you agree?
No, I don't, Peter. It's a bit like saying, well, if we just shut down 5% of our economy, so 95% of our economy, but protect 5%, everything will be okay. I mean, I'm opposed to this policy because it's mythical. No other country's deciding to, is acting to do this. We will shut down, if we did actually try to do it, we would shut down thousands of jobs across our economy. I mean, how are we going to mine coal? How are we going to expand and develop Northern Australian agriculture if we're not allowed to clear land, if we're not allowed to build coal mines, and forget about manufacturing coming back to Australia? If we impose this kind of restriction on our country, when, say, a country like China will just go on its merry way, and last year it brought online over 30 gigawatts of coal-fired power, more than all the coal-fired power in Australia. It's not going to happen, this policy across the world, so why would we shackle ourselves with this when we have much more pressing constraints right now?
It's interesting. Chris Mitchell, who's the former editor of the Australian newspaper, he wrote about this issue today. He's squarely in your corner in terms of the empirical evidence. Paris Agreement, we'll go to that. He said today statistics showing China's emissions have increased by 80% since 2005, and India essentially has doubled its emissions between 2005 and 2018. Now, he says if the world's biggest and the fourth biggest emitters aren't playing ball, why should Australia? Matt Canavan, that's the point you're making, that there's not a lot of fact-based analysis in this debate.
Well, it really hits home for us, Peter, because we've seen firsthand how China has not adhered to a trade agreement we signed with them 5 years ago, but apparently now will turn around and sign a climate agreement and trust them to uphold their side of the bargain over the next 30 to 40 years. 40 years in the case of China, they're saying net zero by 2060. I mean, once you express it just like that, you show how absurd this whole thing is. It's just such a charade. These other countries are not going to do that. We can also look at what other countries have done in the past. Countries like Canada and New Zealand, they like to preen their moral superiority on these issues. They did not meet their Kyoto targets. They came due last year, and they didn't cut their emissions by what they promised in the last climate agreement. So how can we trust them to meet their commitments in any massive net zero emissions target? I mean, we've got a situation right now where China's looking to build a $39 billion city in Papua New Guinea, where we've reached a new record low of Australians employed in manufacturing. We've accumulated $1 trillion in debt over the past year. I don't think we should be talking about the weather in 30 years' time. I think we should be talking about how we can bring factories back to Australia, how we can bring jobs back to Australia. What are we going to do to pay back all this debt so it's not lumbered for future generations? And how do we deal in our region with a China that's increasingly becoming more aggressive and threatening some of the economic advancements we've made in the past 20 years?
Your colleague Barnaby Joyce made the point over the weekend in some comments to Paul Kelly in The Australian. You know, there's all this righteousness on climate policy out of the inner suburbs, but the bill, the cost, is hitting home in regional Australia. Your comments now show that there's this emerging or a further widening divide between you and many of the Liberal Party, particularly those in the inner city suburbs. We've heard this before, Matt Canavan. We've heard these debates inside the coalition. Common sense has generally reigned. Your position's a bit harder. Are the National Party prepared to go to war on this issue inside the coalition?
Well, I can't speak for the Nationals Party, but I'm absolutely prepared to fight like hell for this position, because I didn't join I joined the Liberal Party first, actually, but now the Nationals Party. I didn't join either of those two parties to sign up to massive new regulations on businesses. I didn't sign up to restrict our growth opportunities as a nation. I mean, I'm in Parliament. I want to go down to Canberra to get rid of red tape, to lower taxes, to open up new parts of our country, build dams and open up new farming areas. And, you know, if this is going to be the centrepiece of what we're about, why did I join? It doesn't make any sense. And it's not just Nationals Party members I'm hearing from, Peter. It's across the gamut from those that sign up to this cause. Why are we going down this path when we have all these other challenges in front of us, all the opportunities that we have as a nation that sit on the table and don't get taken up? I mean, put it in this context. We say, I said before, we met our Kyoto Agreement targets, other countries didn't. The only reason we met those targets was because we stripped property rights away from landowners and we stopped developing land. 30 years ago, we were clearing about 700,000 hectares of land a year, growing our farming sector, developing new land. Today, we're actually reducing our farming land. We only cleared 50,000 hectares last year, and over the past decade, we've actually been going backwards. So we're not producing more food, we're not opening up more farming land, and that's the antithesis of what I'd like to achieve. In the short time I'm in this game, I actually want to get behind developing northern agriculture by building more dams, getting back to making things in Australia, not having jobs stolen from us to go overseas. And that's just something. There's a little bit of a space there, I think, for some of us in Liberal National parties to plant a flag and rally behind and do those things for our nation.
I've been watching this this intersection, I think, between the moderates in the Liberal Party and some on the left. I noticed with interest, Get Up is out there running ads, Facebook ads, praising moderate Liberals for speaking out against calls from your party's backbench to build new coal-fired power stations. Now, this is paid advertising. It's run during February. It's asking a whole lot of people on Facebook to write to Liberal MPs, the Trent Zimmermans, the Tim Wilsons of the world, to thank them for standing up to people like you. Now, what do you make of this? Get Up in the past has really gone after the conservative elements of the centre-right, those inside the National Party, those inside the Liberal Party, like Tony Abbott and Peter Dutton. What's all of this about? If Get Up's out there spruiking for Liberals, you've got to question whether they're Liberals anymore, surely.
Well, I'll leave that to the members of the Liberal Party to respond to. What I'll say, though, is a pretty good rule of thumb for me is if Get Up is proposing something, I'll probably be on the other side. Just as a rule of thumb, as a starting position, Peter. If Get Up is proposing massive new radical policies to get rid of all carbon emissions in our country, I think I'll be on the other side because, let's face it, Get Up here now are a party of the inner city elite of this country. And the people I try and represent and fight for every day are those that cop it in the net when these types of policies come in. They have to pay more in power bills, they have their jobs taken away. In the case of farming communities decimated from radical environmental policies. Those are the people on the front line that get hurt by this. And when the bills are stacking up on your fridge and you're running out of magnets to put them on, that's when the rubber hits the road for people. Think, is this really right? Why is my country doing this to me? But in those areas of our country where that problem is not so much an issue, and you might have two BMW X5s in the garage, yes, there's a whole different perspective on these things. But I think we've been successful politically in the last decade or so when we've stood up for those people who are running out of fridge magnets to put the bills in the fridge. And that's what I'll continue to do because it's the right thing for our country, and it's what I'm here, what I got elected for, and who I'm trying to fight for in politics.
Matt Canavan, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Peter. Have a good evening.